Welcome back, everyone, to the Founders Only podcast. I am so excited today to welcome Miranda Lievers. Miranda is a Vancouver-based entrepreneur and the co-founder of Thinkific, where she helped over 50,000 businesses grow and educated more than 100 million students worldwide. In 2021, she took Thinkific public with a $1 billion greater than $1 billion valuation, earning accolades for its innovative approach to business and culture. Passionate about empowering impact-driven entrepreneurs, Miranda has shifted her focus back to small businesses, helping them scale while building vibrant communities. Welcome. I'm so happy to have you today.
Thank you so much for having me. Excited to be here. Excited to see you again.
Yes, so excited to see you again. Let's get started with, can you share your journey to becoming the co-founder of Thinkific?
Sure. Let me try to be concise because I think that is like, how long do we want that story to be? Probably not all that long. But I've always been into small business. From the time that I was a kid, I was, had a craft stand at the end of my driveway in the middle of nowhere, mind you. Nobody was driving down my road, but if they were, I was there and ready to hustle. And fast forward, I did different things, but I really was all about small business and helping small businesses grow. And I realized more than even building my own businesses, I love digging into the weeds with other people's pursuits and what they were doing. And I was at a time in my life before I met my co-founders where I was trying to figure out how to continue to serve the small business community that I cared about, with the recognition that where one path might be coaching or consulting. And I know we've got lots of coaches and consultants likely listening today, but I struggle because small business owners, as we all know, often don't have the resources to hire a coach or consultant. They don't even sometimes know that they need a coach or consultant. And then even if we get past those two hurdles, they only have two hands. They can only implement so many things in their business. And there's a huge delta between all the things that they know that they could or should be doing to grow their business and what they have to do every day just to serve the customers that they have. And so I was struggling because I wanted to serve this community in a bigger way. And I knew that one-to-one wasn't going to be the path that I felt I could have the biggest impact doing that, but wasn't entirely sure where to go next. And that was when I met my co-founder, Greg, Thinkific CEO. He, at the time, I was working with a couple of other folks and building software that I saw the potential of being able to serve this community that I so deeply wanted to serve. So they had been building software for a little while. He had his own law school admissions testing online course that he had hobbled together, and other folks were coming to him and saying, okay, well, I'm not looking to get into law school, but can you help me take my course and put it online? So they had started building software in that direction. And when I met them, they were still sort of producing course content for a handful of folks and sort of custom building out sites effectively, but moving in the direction of being able to do that at scale. And I saw that intersection of the community that I so deeply wanted to serve, the recognition that technology can give people advice where they don't know how to ask for it because the software only works in one way. It can give them an extra set of hands, and it can do so in a way that works for a small business budget. And sort of that's where the magic was born, I suppose, in terms of joining forces and basically saying, you know what, this is worthy of time and energy. Let's go heads down on this and see if we can do something with this. And I sort of feel like, and then you blink and it's almost a decade later and it's like, okay, apparently this is working, because now we've got a team of hundreds of folks and nearly 200 million now people around the globe have used Thinkific to learn. So it's been quite a ride.
When you realized how big this was, do you remember that day?
It's like the boiling frog thing. It sort of happens slowly, I can certainly remember like the times that stand out were often when we would get the whole team together for something outside the office. So when we were smaller, we took the team, when we were 13 people, we went to Whistler. And we rented a house and we bought a bunch of food from Costco and loaded it in the back of my SUV, and we did a weekend retreat. And I remember like a moment when Greg and I stood to the side at one point at that and going like, wow, like this is never going to be this good, is it? Like, this is an amazing team. This is an amazing culture. We feel so dialed. Like, it's never going to be this good. We have to savor this moment. And then fast forward, I remember another time when we had the team, we were a little bit bigger. We were probably, I don't know, 50 people maybe. And we had the team on another trip, and same thing, you know, at night, and we've got, you know, music and people are having a good time. And again, sort of a stolen moment on the side of the room. Wow, like, this is amazing. We didn't think that we could continue to grow this, and especially the team and culture, because you hear people talk about how culture erodes and how, like, as you grow, you just can't keep holding on to that same small group feel. And so we were so aware of that advice. And so every time we would kind of get together and be like, wow, like, this is better than it was, but like, we've got to hold on to it. We've got to hold on to it. It's never going to be this good. And I remember right before the pandemic, and I'm gonna cry. I cry all the time on podcasts. I'm like, oh, this is I haven't thought about this in a long time.
I love it. Let's start again.
I remember the Christmas party, the holiday party that we had at the end of I guess it would have been 2019. So the last time we had our team like all together before the pandemic happened. And I got in front of that team for the holiday party, and I remember sort of like have it, you know, I talked about our customers and I talked about the impact that we had. But I looked around the room and I talked about the fact that we grew and it got better, and we grew and it got better. And I no longer had to question if we would be able to hold on to who we are and the reason that we're coming together and doing this work, because, you know, we'd proven over and over again is that, you know, when we're focused on the same things and we're coming together to achieve that work, there are no limits to what's possible. And little did we know what was about to happen in terms of the explosive growth of our company. But I was with the Thinkific team last week. I'm not there for the day-to-day anymore. I stepped away 2 years ago, but I was there last week for our annual kickoff, which is the one time of year now that we get the whole team together. There's about 300 folks these days in a room, and it's quite an incredible feeling to stand there with a stolen moment with my co-founder Greg at the side of the room and look around and go, whoa.
I love that. I love just hearing that progression. And, you know, after talking to several now founders who have created something at the scale that you've created, what I continually hear is the intentionality of building culture. And we're definitely going to touch back on that. I think that the founders who are solely guided or motivated by generating revenue cannot achieve that level of success. And of course, my businesses are so much smaller in scale than yours are or are. But I know that proud feeling when you've built something that people have grabbed a hold of and are feeling empowered by and motivated by and really believe in this set of vision and core values and a vision and a mission that you and your co-founders have created. And there's really no greater feeling. And I totally understand the desire or the feeling that you need to cry, because it is, I say it often, it is nothing like it when you know you are helping people, if you're so motivated to do that. But like I said, consistently I see that the people who are most successful in terms of building and scaling from a revenue perspective, from a size perspective, that intentionality and that building a culture and being clear at the outset of what you are trying to create is absolutely key. So, okay, so now let's go back to Miranda as a child. So, who were you before becoming an entrepreneur? But it sounds like, though, you were an entrepreneur very, very young. And before you even answer that question, I often say, so I ask this question of everyone, and it is so interesting to see how there are really just two buckets here. There are the people who were born to be an entrepreneur, who were having the lemonade stands or hustling teddy bear postcards at 7 or something like that. And then there are the ones who happen to identify a really big problem and set out to solve it. And that's generally the only two buckets that there are. But let me give you an opportunity to answer. So who were you before becoming an entrepreneur?
Yeah, I mean, I was the super nerdy kid that didn't relate super well to others. It turned spoiler alert, I now have an autism diagnosis as an adult. But you know, I was the precocious, like very bright kid who had a craft stand at the end of my driveway. I heard about I don't share this story all that often. Entrepreneurial, like when I was in grade 4, so whatever that is, 9 or 10 years old, and I had heard, I don't know, like probably on some children's program or something, I'd heard about drugs. Drugs are bad. I didn't really know what drugs were, but it's like drugs are bad. And so then I created like an anti-drug club, and I like wrote to like ADAC, which is like one of the Canadian organizations for supporting addictions, etc. And so and they'd sent me a bunch of swag, and I was like, it's like we're going to tackle this problem. But I got one of my very first lessons in community and how to actually start a movement and endear people to your cause, because my grade 4 teacher was so excited and wanted to support me in pulling people together into my like anti-drug club. But there was no space in the sort of school curriculum or schedule, so she made everybody in my class stay in from recess or lunch to come to my anti-drug club. And needless to say, it didn't last very long because nobody wanted to be forced to be there reading these very, sort of like adult-oriented pamphlets that I had gotten and stickers or whatever from some organization. And nobody, not even myself, like really knew what a drug was or how we would actually avoid them in our lives. But needless to say, one of my very first leadership endeavors was cut short with a valuable lesson about endearing people to your cause.
I love that story. When I was in the 4th grade, I had a teacher, Mr. Friedman, who actually was my first customer. I don't want to say my first real customer, but my first recurring customer. That is the best way to describe it. And he rewarded me in pizza for lunch every day. And I just thought that I was so much better. But I totally understand at that age, when you really, it is so exciting to create at that age. And well, it's always exciting to create, let's be honest. But at that age, when you have created something and adults are impressed, that's the thing. That's the thing that really makes you sit and wonder, like, oh, wait a minute. Like, this is something I can actually do. Like, the adults actually support me. But how funny that your teacher kind of got it wrong in the way of the execution. That's very, very funny. So looking back now on your journey as a founder, and I'm sure you have so much more to create, but what would you say has been your greatest accomplishment or lesson, and why?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's so interesting because I think that it's so easy when you set out to sort of like, we're all really good at like setting milestones. We had a family friend when I was a kid that their company had IPO'd. And so I grew up hearing about this was the pinnacle of success and business success in my dad's eyes. And so I'd sort of grown up hearing about like this idea of IPO. And it wasn't until, much, much later where it was like even a possibility, where it's like, wait, like this thing could one day IPO. And that was rapidly accelerated and brought forward during the pandemic. But I think that I and others often have these milestones where it's like, oh, like one day wouldn't it be great if, and it's like I could IPO, I could, get such and such, raise such and such amount of money, or hit this milestone. And over and over and over again, and never more so than in the past few years, have I really come to sort of just be reminded viscerally that it's never the destination. So, with the IPO, for example, it was 6 months, literally eat, breathe. Like I was sleeping for 5 hours a night. I basically didn't see my kids. Somebody just brought me food like a few times a day, like really heads down, the hardest work that I've ever done for that process. But it became public and everybody knew about it sort of the day we started trading. And so I've been asked countless times. I was like, well, what was that day like? Like what did it feel like when you finally hit, this IPO goal? And out of all of the days involved in that process, that day was the one I would be the first to give up. And that was like, it was the most anticlimactic and most ungrounding because, it's like it was the first day where it's like I woke up and my calendar wasn't full of like 100 meetings and deliverables and work to be done and people to coordinate with and so on and so forth. It was sort of like a friend who has worked on political campaigns said whether you win or lose, sort of the day after the election, there'll be a point when you walk into the campaign office and there's no people in there and there's just papers and boxes everywhere because again, whether you won or lose, it's sort of things have moved on to the next phase and that's not where we're at anymore. And I think that so much of how we think and talk about success is all about chasing the milestone. It's like, raise the money, get your face on the billboard in Times Square, get the magazine article, like all of these things. But I've learned over and over and over again that it's all about the journey, not the destination. Because if you chase the destination, I mean, our IPO could have been pulled on the last day. Like you don't know until it completes. But it was the 6 months of work to get there that was like an incredible ride. And that would have been the same whether, on the final day we had, like got to ring the bell or not. And I know that certainly would have colored the experience, but it's all about the journey and you've got to enjoy and really live in the moment of what you're doing because you can't predict what the future is. You don't know what you're going to, what you're going to be able to do at the end of that work, but you've got to love what you're doing as you get there.
That is absolutely the best answer I've ever heard to that question in my life. Oh, there's so many, it's like a gold mine instead of a gold nugget because there's so many aspects that we could take that conversation. And the first one that comes to mind is, obviously what you actually said of the process, this journey of becoming, a journey of achieving is better and greater and more impactful than the destination. Absolutely wonderful. But for the people who are perfectionists like me, that the lesson in that is so powerful because if you focus on the journey and the journey of becoming, then you will not get caught up on the perfection. You will just solely focus on the progression. And I really love that. I absolutely love that. So thank you for sharing that and saying it so perfectly and pointedly. Well, my next question for you is, so what's your approach to building and maintaining a feedback-driven culture?
Okay, let me try to make this story a little bit quick, but it is really tactical. And so, you mentioned before, like I think you already mentioned, culture before, and really like a business is a human system. Like a business is a human system. And what that means is that in all of the beautiful ways that humans are humans, like how we most effectively grow our company is to not think of them like a mechanical machine. So when we think about a car and we build a car, and I'm going to date myself because in my, when I was a kid, like cars still had carburetors, but it's like, you've got like an alternator and you've got a carburetor, you've got like all the pieces of the car. And when you install that, let's say the alternator on day one, if you close the hood and then don't come back and look at it for 5 years, you look in and that piece of equipment is still doing exactly the same job. It might need to be, oiled, or it might not be quite as efficient. It might have gotten tired along the way. But at the end of the day, it is still doing the exact same job that it was doing on day one. And I think a lot of how we've taught business and how we've thought about business over the years is really about thinking about our businesses as mechanical machines. Your job is this, just come in, punch your clock, like do your job as you're told, and then leave at the end of the day. Your job is this, your job is this. But the reality is that businesses are not mechanical machines. Businesses are human machines, and humans are delightful in all sorts of beautiful ways. Humans are unpredictable. Humans are sometimes unreliable, sometimes emotional, sometimes distractible. But all of that is coming with humans are innovative and curious and creative and collaborative, and humans figure shit out. And in a human machine, your machine will self-evolve. When we create the conditions for that to happen positively, your machine can self-evolve in ways that makes things better, so that when you open the hood later on, you're like, oh, like I thought I had an alternator, but over time it realized that like it could collaborate. Like, now it's actually doing these other jobs, or now it's actually doing that with half the resources, or now it's doing something else that I couldn't have imagined when I first set it up.
Mm-hmm.
And when we create a human system without the ability for folks to work together and grow and evolve over time, we can create systems that break themselves, where because of a lack of communication or a lack of understanding of how actually, because the alternator of course doesn't just work on its own. It's like, well, actually it's there to charge the battery, and it does that because it's spinning, because it's being turned by something else in the engine, and so it's spinning and then it's charging the battery. But if that alternator didn't fully understand that that's how it connected over here, and that's the real job that it's here to do over here, it might have got the impression that it really was supposed to prioritize something else, and now it's actually charging the battery less efficiently than it started. And so we can break our human systems because of this same phenomenon. So that all being said, focusing on how we build and grow culture is really key, and we need to have as many rhythms and focus on the inside of our company as we do externally and with customers. And many of us are familiar with, creating feedback loops with our customers, which is really just about like, how are we taking in information from our customers? How are we learning from that, iterating on that, making it better, and communicating to them that we've made things better, like based on what we've learned from them. And that's really about how do we refine our product offering or our service offering or our pricing or our messaging over time. We're doing that in constant feedback loop with our customers in an ideal world, but we can and should be doing that internally too. And so I said really quickly before, I'll stop saying that because every time I think I say really quickly, it's a really long story. But one of the things we did at Thinkific for this was we created a quarterly engagement survey where we simply asked our team, it's like Net Promoter Score, but I cared much less about the number. So it's like on a scale of 1 to 10, how likely are you to recommend Thinkific as a place to work? The number is nice because it goes on a slide, but it doesn't actually tell us anything. More importantly, were the 3 questions that followed. When you think about your career here, and how things could be better, what should we start doing? What can we stop doing? And what should we keep doing so that we don't lose things that are working now? Okay, we started that process in 2016, and it wasn't even super strategic at the time, but I'm glad that we did it, and we ended up continuing the rhythm, because what it meant was that every single quarter we simply asked our team, what's working, what's not working, what should we keep? And over time, I can trace pretty much everything that touches our team back to what they told us that they needed and wanted. So early on, our team told us, that they wanted performance reviews. I was not somebody that wanted performance reviews. I'm like, this is why I'm an entrepreneur. And it's like, okay, fine, cool. We'll do performance reviews. Then our team told us, later on, they wanted more frequent performance reviews. I was like, okay, we'll do every 6 months. Then they said they wanted more frequent performance reviews. And this is over a period of years, and it's like, okay, so then we went to quarterly. And then the feedback was really mixed. It was like, oh, some people are like, yes, all the feedback, all the reviews, keep going. And half the people were like, holy heck, stop. This is way too much. And so then we dialed it back to 3 times a year. And I think that that's the rhythm that they're still sitting on today. But it was really built with our team. So it's like listening so that we understand what's bubbling up for people. And that doesn't mean, solve all the problems. It's just saying, hey, we listened, and these were the top 1 or 2 or 3 things that we're hearing. So listen, iterate. So it's like, what can we change on the basis of this feedback? And again, it's not about changing everything. It might be like, actually, we can change one thing. Like this is like, we can do something that is small, but because it is so specific to what people are saying, it can be really impactful. So it's like, this is what we heard. This is what we're going to change as a response to that, and communicate what we're doing, and then just start the process again. It's like, hey, like last quarter, we heard that you wanted to feel more connected with the community. And when we talked to a bunch of you about what that could look like, volunteering was coming up a lot. So we connected with a local organization, and anybody that wants to volunteer, we're happy to pay for like a half day for people to go once a quarter to volunteer with this local organization. You can go with colleagues. Like, how does that sound? And right. And so then it's really about, how do we listen? How do we iterate on what we're doing? How do we communicate what we're doing? And then repeat that process so that over time, even when we had to make hard decisions, even when we weren't in a position to give raises to the level that we might have wanted to, or things were rocky, our team knew that they would be heard, that they would have a voice into the process, that we would communicate what it is that we can do and what it is that we can't do. Because there's always like 1,000 things that people want, but it's not that people need all these things to happen, it's that people need to feel heard, and that this is a place that is listening and is going to communicate to them like human beings, and that together we can build and grow not just a great company, but a great team.
Absolutely. I had implemented, not when I started the company, but probably about 10 years ago, we did a whole rebrand. And I decided at that time that I was going to build an employee first culture. And I shared that with the team, and I told them why, and I told them what it meant to me was that I was going to prioritize their needs over the needs of the customer, which was scary to say. But my thought process was that employees who feel valued and heard and feel like they are doing good work towards a clear mission, right, and vision, that they will treat the customers better, and they will care more about the outcomes for the customers. And then also you just made me think of something I posted the other day, which was culture does what compensation can't. And I think that, well, so let's talk just a little bit about what you mentioned. So you mentioned being heard, iterating, and implementing, right? And you also touched on a little bit about what to do or how to do that when you can't deliver. And I think that is something that I want to explore just a little bit, because I think that it could be very helpful to a lot of listeners. Because first of all, if you're collecting that feedback and you're listening to it and you have a plan or desire to implement it, I mean, that's great. But those times when you can't, what do? Right? And I think you kind of answered this already, but it sounds like what you said was the consistency of listening and the consistency of the feedback collection system can help to alleviate the expectations and the pressure of delivering within a certain time frame, because people know that your intention is to do the thing. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I think that, even another example of something that had come out of those feedback loops was early on our team told us that they wanted to have more visibility into the strategic direction of the company and like where we were thinking and where things were going. And even when they weren't part of the conversation, they wanted to be brought into the conversation. And what that meant was is that, very early, we shared very transparently about, our financials and how we were making decisions. And we would do, at first quite vulnerable feeling, ask us anythings, where we would happily sit in front of the whole group and pull questions that nobody had pre-screened out of a box and answer literally anything at all. But it created a space and an opportunity where our team, especially really in those early years, our team trusted what we said because it wasn't us versus them. We were all just really there and doing the work. And even if somebody, even if a rule didn't have anything to do with the financials, everybody understood where we were financially. And as a, a growing tech startup, we were always we were always burning more cash than we were bringing in. We weren't profitable. And so when people understand deeply, it's okay, the goal is to grow. We're investing to grow. We're putting this back in, we're hiring more support team because that's what we're going to need based on the trajectory of where we're going. And folks had visibility into the decisions we were making. And so, so even when I think back to those surveys, even when we were in early years where arguably we were paying, sort of at the bottom of the market rate, those surveys never said I want to be paid more because our team also had visibility. It's no, we're here for a shared belief and mission on what we're doing, and we love the people we're working with, and I feel heard and I feel valued. But nobody was feeling like we were just printing money and not giving it to them, because that wasn't the reality. No, actually we're just seeing if we can make this a thing. And when there's that safety and trust and visibility, everybody kind of knows what are we here and doing and what's possible. And so that, made a big difference as well.
Yes. Love it so much. So let's talk about balancing motherhood with these tremendous commitments outside of the home. Mm-hmm. Of course, you also have a husband. And so talk to me about how you balanced and also how that's changed as you've taken a step back. How has your home life specifically changed being a mother and a wife from the time you were really in that scale up stage where you were working those crazy hours to now where you have a little bit more say, maybe a lot more say on how your day goes,
Yeah. I've got two fairly young kids, 5 and 11 years old. And, as the mothers who are listening know, it's that's a huge, commitment and time and so on. But it is not possible to do it all by yourself. My ability to focus on work relied pretty much entirely on, my partner being the most amazing dad and continues to be the most amazing dad on the planet. And he's been full-time dad for, since the pandemic at this point, when things really, took off. And so he's been full-time dad. And so, I give him all of the credit, because, he's the reason my children have clothes and lunches and play dates and all of those things, because, and I know that many moms don't have, that kind of support or are making different choices for how they want to balance the time and energy in their family. But I just have all of the respect for the, the everything that takes to do. And my life only functions because of an incredible super dad.
Meet Brandy, your all-in-one content creation sidekick designed to make creating and managing your brand's content effortless. Let me show you how it works. Got a team? Bring them in. With Brandy, everyone can pitch in to create content that clicks. Managing multiple brands? Easily switch between profiles so you're always ready for the next project. The Brand Voice Analyzer ensures your content always sounds like you. Stuck on where to start? Check out our handy prompt templates. They're like creative jumpstarts to get things moving. Every edit, every version saved. With content revision history, nothing gets lost, and you can always pick up right where you left off. Everything your brand needs, it's all right here in your brand asset library. Stay organized like a pro with custom folders for every project. No more hunting for that one file. Brandy does too, and is ready to help you connect. Or in any language, really. Speak to your audience in the words they know best. Need ideas or have questions? Just ask Brandy. Save time with custom snippets. Your most used phrases, always handy when you need them. Keep your notes, links, and ideas in one spot, so you're never hunting for that one piece of inspiration. Get personalized content tips and SEO strategies to help your brand stand out online. Join Brandy today and make your content creation smarter, faster, and better. Let's create something amazing.
That is wonderful and very refreshing. And you know that this season 6 is all female. And so my goal, my hope for this season is to explore how differently we all approach these decisions for family, for balancing what we want for ourselves and the things we want to accomplish for ourselves, the individual goals we have for ourselves, as well as the goals we have for our home, as well as the goals we have for our businesses. Is there anything more you want to share? I don't want to ask a specific question, but is there anything else you want to share or that you think would be helpful to the audience around how you were able to get to that point? Because as a wife and a mother, I know that it can be challenging to get there, and the dynamics can be challenging sometimes. But
Yeah, maybe the only other sort of like slight note on that, I've been married for 25 years this year.
wow.
And our relationship, we just continue to learn so much more about each other and communication and how, our relationship works and what needs we fulfill for each other and what needs we don't fulfill for each other. And so, especially when I think about those really hard years, is also recognizing that it's like in any relationship, this goes for co-founder relationships or partners, etc., is just giving grace to the uniqueness of how we both work and approach the world and our brains work. Because if I'm expecting my partner or anybody to think like me and do things like me, I am always going to be sorely disappointed. But if I recognize, that their strengths are going to be very different than mine, and there are things that I would cringe at doing the way that they might do them, and that's okay. And so that would be a lesson that I wish that I could go back and tell my younger self, because I probably caused myself a lot of grief over time before I started to really understand that.
Perfectly said. And boy, you're speaking to me directly right now. That is a lesson that I am currently trying to really work through in my own relationship. And so that's great advice, actually. Okay, so having raised over $200 million over the years, what advice would you give to founders who are preparing for their first investor pitch and round of funding?
Yeah, great question. I think, it's often said when folks are doing sort of that early round that it's not about the numbers, it's about you and it's about the story. And I would say, honestly, even at the IPO level, I would say, yeah, the numbers are important and that gets you in the door. And yes, folks are having to run, the math on the numbers behind it all. But at the end of the day, they're also investing in you, your team, and the story. We like to think sometimes that we are not emotional buyers or investors, but we're all human beings. Again, we're not machines. We're not computers. So the computers might flag, what fits the profile or what doesn't fit the profile. But at the end of the day, it comes down to who do we resonate with? What is the story that connects to us? How do we, how do we respond to this? And then we often back it up with the numbers and the fundamentals and so on and so forth. But when talking to folks who are thinking about going out and pitching and getting investors and so on and so forth, it's yes, you've got to have your numbers dialed. You've got to, know those things, and you've got to be able to present them and be able to paint the picture. But it's about storytelling. It's about helping them believe what you believe, and to believe that, and when you truly believe, it's like that becomes contagious and infectious, and other folks will buy into supporting you in that journey.
So content, as you mentioned just now, is generally the cornerstone of building a business. Content is often about storytelling, if not 100% of the time. So how do you recommend that brands approach this development of their story, putting it into words, putting it into messaging that they can clearly keep their brand differentiated, keep that integrity of their brand and their brand voice? Can you tell me a little bit about what you all did in a space that has gotten quite crowded, but you all were able to stand out? Tell me a little bit about how you were able to maintain that brand integrity and brand voice and storytelling in your scaling process.
Yeah, I think storytelling in some ways, when you've got incredible customers, it feels like a bit of a cheat, because you don't have to like dream up an incredible story. You just need to go gather them. You need to talk to your customers and get the stories. You need to hit record when you're talking to customers as a matter of practice. So probably the best advice I can give is create rhythms that naturally capture the stories from your customers over time, so that when it's time to create a pitch or a landing page, or even engage an audience on a webinar, that you don't have to start from scratch being like, do I have any stories around here? But instead be able to go to whatever, the spreadsheet or the Airtable, where it's like, oh, here are, like 100 stories that were auto AI transcripted and summarized from the last 100 customer calls, where I can just look through and be like, oh, like this is interesting. Is there enough here to tell the story as is? Or maybe then there's just a quick follow-up call, be like, hey, I love what you're doing with my product, service, whatever. Can I ask you some questions? Because I'd love to share your story. And folks are happy to have their story be told, especially when they're achieving success and unlocking, things for their own lives and their own businesses because of what you do. They are thrilled to participate in that process, so that you can get it's like a collaborative thing where you can use their story to spread the word with others, and they're often very happy to do that.
Couldn't have said that better. What advice would you give to the next generation of aspiring female leaders who are looking to scale their business? This is now general advice. We've talked about family, we've talked about relationships, we've talked about building culture, we've talked about storytelling. What is just a general piece of advice that you wish somebody would have told you as a woman in business?
Don't seek saviors. So what I mean by that is, I think especially early on, it was, the feeling, and not sometimes not the feeling, sometimes the assertion that other people have the answers for you. It's like, oh, you just need the right advisors. You just need to listen to your investors. You just need to listen to the other founders who will tell you what to do, how to get there, what playbook you need to implement, and exactly the right strategy. And all of those things are valuable as insights into the decisions that you make, but you make them. And when you are passionate about a thing and you're heads down, frankly, believing what often no one else can see or believe, you are the only person that at the end of the day needs to live with the decisions and can frankly make the decisions, because you see the world in a way that others can't. And all of those pieces of advice and feedback, and sometimes they're coming they're coming as direction as opposed to like advice. But don't seek saviors. Like, the other people don't have the answers. They're not going to come and save you or bail you out. It's on you, and that's scary, but also exciting. And have confidence even when you don't have confidence, and that won't lead you astray.
I love that. The only thing that I would add to that is trusting your intuition and trusting yourself, which it sounds like you were saying.
Yeah.
But yes, that's really beautiful. Okay. So reflecting now on your 2-year sabbatical, how has this time influenced your view on leadership and building culture during this time?
Yeah, this is a topic that I've talked about much less, so I feel much less polished. So I might get a little bit all over the place, but it is interesting. So yes, I stepped away from Thinkific 2 years ago on sabbatical, and at the time I thought maybe I would take 6 months off. Of course, it's 2 years later, and I'm only barely dipping my toes back in. It turns out it's quite hard to get off of sabbatical when you don't have quite the same posting functions as before. But I have learned so much more on sabbatical about life, the universe, and everything, about like life, about how this world works, and more importantly about myself than I have in the 40 some odd years before. And I talked before about, the point is the journey and not the destination, et cetera, et cetera. And well, I've hit a number of milestones that I know many people put on pedestals and say this, it's like, if only I could IPO, if only I could raise X number of dollars, if only I could, whatever, be a C-suite in a public company, or all of these things. And I would give up every single one of those things, including the financial success, if in order to keep what I've learned about myself in the last 2 years. If I had to make a decision, is I would take the last 2 years. And in many ways, the visibility and the recognition that the way that I worked my whole life was harmful. I didn't spend time on myself. I didn't have hobbies. I didn't believe in hobbies. I just worked all the time. Morning, noon, and night, and weekends. And did that, with belief in the work that we were doing. And that was before Thinkific too, even like previous things that I did. I've always just worked really hard and hustled and gone heads down. But that was to the detriment of myself, my self-care, my mental health, getting to know myself, and getting probably the biggest thing that I've learned the last couple of years is like actually like all of the masks I was wearing. I mentioned earlier that, I've got a shiny new autism diagnosis. Turns out when you've got time to work on yourself and actually, sort of do all the pent up years of therapy, because I never had time to, spend a lot of time on me. But yeah, it's like, and seeing all the ways that I was masking, all the ways that I was trying to be and play by the rule, like trying to be what I was expected to be rather than what I was and who I was, trying to fit into the mold of a set of rules that society had handed to us, instead of carving my own path and living my own way, learning what actually brings me joy. And so there's so many things there. Like, I was extremely fortunate to be able to, I bought my dream home. I filled it with my dream things. And then you kind of look around and go, it's like, oh, I thought this was it. Like I thought this was the thing. And it's like, oh, and I'm putting on my home on the market in a few weeks, and I don't need it. Now I'm going to go into a phase of honestly shedding many of my possessions, because it's like, I thought that this was the thing because I was told that this was the thing, but I achieved the thing, and I recognize the great privilege in being able to even say that. But it's quite a thing to get there and realize, like, it doesn't matter. None of this matters. The things don't matter. This house doesn't matter. What matters for me, and it's going to be different for everybody, but what matters for me is connection with people that I care about, sitting around great conversation with good food, and that could be around a campfire in a provincial park. But I just love experiences and connecting with people and slowing down enough to see, the beauty that is around all of us, and not prioritizing other people's measures of success above finding moments of joy.
Yeah. Woo. Yeah, that will make me cry. Okay. Woo. Yes, I feel that every word. Oh, Miranda, I don't have anything to add. Boy, do I feel that. You all heard that. Okay, that was another gold mine. That was another gold mine. Okay. So let's just wrap up that question though. Let's say that you wanted to lead another organization.
Mm-hmm.
Now that you've gone through this and you've come out on the other side of knowing, of understanding how much your personal peace and staying true to yourself and doing the things that bring you the greatest joy is now the priority in your life, and also I'm sure your children and your family, and keeping that front and center for yourself, how would that impact your leadership of another organization? What would you do differently, if anything, now that you've come out on the other side with that knowledge?
Yeah. I think leadership in many ways internally would be quite similar. Like I feel really good about how we led the team. How I led myself was maybe a little bit different, and I held myself to different standards, but forced is the wrong word. We greatly encouraged our team to take their vacation time. We had an unlimited vacation time policy, but we would pull reports on who wasn't taking enough time, and making sure that we were pushing folks to do that, and making sure that we're not, driving a culture where it's like people were expected to be responding late at night or on weekends and so on and so forth. But I don't think I held myself to those same, I didn't those same things. So I wouldn't change a ton about how I learned through that process to lead. But I would change how I would think about the company and growth overall. And that's a bit of a longer conversation, but I would be, and I am in the process actually of starting, very slowly, building something new. But I won't be going down the growth capital route. Like I think that things shift and the priority shifts greatly as soon as we take in money from other people with the intent to grow. And so when we're building companies in order to serve a community with a problem that resonates with us and people that resonate with us, that's a bold and beautiful mission. And I think that we can do that in ways that allow us to grow really incredible companies. And when we take capital in order to further that mission, that money comes with an expectation of a return on a timeline. And no matter how many conversations we think we have about being aligned around what is the goal here and who do we serve, that money comes with an expectation of a return that supersedes anything else. And it can shift the trajectory of a business in ways that a founder can't reverse over time. And I think that, fast forward, we can look at, there's many examples of how that plays out in our society in ways that are harmful and in ways that probably weren't foreseen by those founders when they set out on a mission to build the thing or do the thing. But what exists today is a machine that's designed to extract money from our systems, our team members, our customers, our planet. And I would be very hesitant to put myself in that position again.
Totally understand that. And that almost brings our conversation full circle, because we talked in the beginning about how the companies that really continue to scale and grow, how the intentionality of solving the problem and building the culture is actually above the revenue generation. But when you insert the expectations and the revenue growth, it becomes the priority and shifts the vision and the mission, even though it may not change the mission on paper, but it sure does change that mission. And we've seen so many instances of companies that have raised tons of money and can't, it's like a runaway train after that, So definitely agree with you on that. How has your definition of success changed during your sabbatical? Which I think you're going to say, but you correct me if I'm wrong, you're going to say that now the success is, are you happy? What's best for you? How are you leading yourself, right? Am I right?
Yeah, I think it's really about not chasing other people's dreams and measures of value, and just being really intentional about, because it's not just a lot of what I want to spend my time on is continuing to serve and support others. So it's not just about me, but it is about being really clear, whose dreams am I chasing, and did I choose them for me?
So, what's one book or podcast? And I know this is probably the hardest question I'll ask you, but what's one book, podcast, or resource that has profoundly impacted your perspective and mindset as a co founder?
Great question. It's a beautifully quick read called Thinking in Systems by a woman named Danella Meadows. And it is a book about systems thinking and how that applies. It's not strictly a business book, but it changes your perspective about how things in our world are all interconnected and why it's so hard to make change and big change. And it was the first time that I read a book like that, and it's like a theme a bit on this conversation, but I cried realizing that people saw the world that in a way similar to how my brain saw the world. And so it's just a beautiful book on systems thinking and shifting how you see the interconnectedness in all things.
What's next for you, Miranda?
Like very slowly and intentionally getting off of sabbatical. So I'm leading Mastermind this quarter. I've got 12 incredible women in sort of the 1 to 10 million revenue range across diverse industries. That sold out honestly even before we really advertised it at all. But sort of slowly dipping my toe back into that scaling space. I love helping folks scale business and really just helping folks see what is right in front of them in new and different ways so that they can continue to do what they are on this planet to do. And so I plan to run another mastermind sort of probably mid-year and continue on that work. And after that, we'll see.
And where can people follow you and your journey moving forward?
Yeah, Instagram is the best place, Miranda Lievers on there, just first and last name.
Thank you so much for joining me today. And thanks everyone for listening to this wonderful conversation. I hope it was as insightful and inspiring for you as it was for me. And we'll see you next time. Bye.